The man accidentally dug up a world-class pink diamond, a stone whose size and color were enough to shake the world. With his status as a slave, Solomon desperately wanted to keep the diamond for himself. But just recently, a fellow worker who had only hidden a tiny, rice grain-sized diamond in his mouth was discovered and shot dead on the spot. Where should a diamond this large be hidden? In that moment, Solomon's heart began to beat faster. Just then, a loud explosion rang out. The nearby water pump had exploded. The explosion drew everyone's attention. Solomon quickly seized the opportunity, crouched down slightly, and hid the diamond between his toes. Then, he used the excuse of needing to use the restroom to leave quickly. But unexpectedly, the rebel commander still noticed Solomon's suspicious behavior. He immediately blocked his path. Fortunately, the diamond was hidden under the sole of his foot. Even after being searched all over, nothing unusual was found. However, as Solomon reached a secluded spot to hide the diamond, the cold muzzle of a gun was pressed against his head. It turned out the commander had not given up and had quietly followed him. Just as Solomon was about to hand over the diamond, fate smiled upon him once again. Government forces launched a surprise attack, and a bomb landed right next to the two of them. The rebel commander was severely injured on the spot, while Solomon seized the opportunity to run. Afterward, Solomon went to a dry tree and buried the diamond there. Immediately after, he was captured by government forces. But upon arriving at the prison, Solomon came face to face with that same rebel commander. It turned out he wasn't dead, only injured in the eye. Despite that, he recognized Solomon instantly and roared in front of everyone. "This punk has a priceless pink diamond. Whoever finds it gets a big reward from me." Everyone began to look at Solomon with covetous eyes. To protect himself, he vehemently denied it, even stripping off all his clothes to prove his innocence. Although this method might have subdued the small fry, it couldn't deceive Danny. Danny was a white man born and raised in Africa, an unscrupulous black market diamond smuggler. Wherever there were diamonds, he could be found. However, this was a dangerous profession. One small slip-up and you could lose your life. But with his vast experience, Danny had honed his cunning skills. He could not only recognize and prevent robberies, but also successfully offload smuggled goods. That day, Danny had once again easily obtained a batch of diamonds. To transport these diamonds to a neighboring country to be sold, he disguised himself as a magazine reporter and hired local shepherds for cover. The diamonds were sewn under the skin of one of the sheep. But what he didn't expect was that someone like him, who had never failed, would stumble this time. Seeing that he was about to be caught on the spot, Danny had no choice but to call on his boss, Kutsi. As the head of Africa's largest mercenary army, Kutsi was famous throughout the region, but the opposition not only showed him no respect, but threw Danny straight into prison. But because of this, Danny was lucky enough to learn that Solomon was in possession of a rare pink diamond. Therefore, after being bailed out by his accomplice, he immediately reported this news to them and instructed them to get Solomon out at all costs. Because with his many years of experience in the diamond trade, Danny understood the value of that pink diamond far better than Solomon. Once he had it, he could not only achieve financial freedom, but also escape Kutsi's control and leave Africa for good. After giving his instructions, Danny returned to the hotel. As soon as he walked through the door, he used a dagger to pry out one of his teeth. Hidden inside was a diamond. Clearly, he would only take it out as a last resort. When Danny went out to exchange money, a man snuck into his room. At the same time, his accomplices had also bailed Solomon out of prison and gave him some money before he left to prevent him from being thrown back in jail for being destitute. Solomon was completely bewildered and didn't think much of it, because at that moment, he was single-mindedly focused on finding his family. It turned out that before, Solomon was just an ordinary fisherman, raising 3 children with his beloved wife. Though life was simple, it was not peaceful. His son Jiel was particularly well-behaved, understanding, and eager to learn. Every day, he would wake up on time and walk 5 kilometers of mountain roads to get to school. But that day, when Solomon was picking up his son from school, they suddenly encountered a group of armed rebels. These men were cruel, bloodthirsty, and inhumane. As soon as they entered the village, they began to fire indiscriminately at civilians, including many children. But when they killed, they didn't even blink an eye. In the chaos, Solomon helped his wife and children escape successfully, but he himself was captured on the spot. Initially, he was supposed to have an arm chopped off, but the enemy saw that he was strong and robust and felt it was a waste. So they tied him up and sent him to the diamond mines to do hard labor. Then followed the scene from the beginning of the story. Elsewhere, after exchanging his money, Danny went to a bar. But his purpose was not to party, but to find the owner to order a pistol. Just then, Maddie's beauty caught his attention. Initially, Danny just intended to find a girl to sleep with, but after a bit of conversation, he discovered she was a reporter and even immediately guessed he was a diamond smuggler. Danny hated getting involved with the press, but Maddie stuck to him, demanding he provide information to expose the blood diamond trade and the biggest smuggler behind it. However, no matter how much Danny liked beautiful women, he would not reveal any information to a strange reporter. Returning to the hotel, seeing the ransacked room, Danny immediately realized his accomplice had secretly reported the news about the pink diamond to Colonel Cutsey. Although he understood that in this man-eating land, trust was the cheapest commodity, he still couldn't contain his anger. And the guy who broke into his room, after finding nothing, also immediately showed himself. The two were on the same side, talking normally on the surface but with different thoughts in their hearts. Danny had decided to go back to see the Colonel, to lay everything bare and punch the man hard in the face to vent his anger. Not long after, Danny was invited to the Colonel's manor for tea. As the biggest mercenary leader in Africa, the Colonel both traded diamonds and helped the government suppress rebels. One could say he made a fortune from the war. How could a man who only cared about money and looked down on everyone else possibly pass up a rare pink diamond? So he gave a firm order, demanding Danny get that diamond for him. If successful, it would clear all his previous business debts. At the same time, he was also well aware of Danny's ambition, knowing he wanted to escape Africa. So he picked up a handful of red dirt from the ground and said, "This is your home. You can never leave Africa." Danny, who had followed the Colonel since he was a boy, understood his methods and brutality and could only rein in his sharpness and focus on dealing with Solomon. But at this point, Solomon didn't trust anyone. He insisted he had never seen any large pink diamond. Reluctantly, Danny had to resort to stalling tactics. In the evening, he returned to the bar. The owner gave him the pistol he had ordered and threw in a piece of news. "The rebels will attack here tomorrow." He kindly advised him to leave early to save his life. Just then, Danny saw Maddie again. Unexpectedly, after parting on bad terms last time, this time they clung to each other like lovers who had just been separated. It's just that one lusted for the flesh, while the other only wanted to gather smuggling information. However, even in the extremely ambiguous atmosphere, neither of them would take the other's bait. Losing patience, Maddie immediately switched to a direct attack, saying she had met too many people like him, who cared nothing for human life for the sake of money. Danny also lost interest, but when he went to the bar for a drink, Maddie refused to let him go and followed him. This time, Danny didn't hold back either and retorted, "You think you're so noble? You think you can change Africa? In fact, you're also a member of the blood diamond trade. If it weren't for American girls like you always dreaming of a fairy tale wedding, a sparkling stone, then these diamonds wouldn't be so valuable and no one would go to such lengths to smuggle them." But Maddie countered that not every American girl wants a fairy tale wedding, just like not every African lives by slaughtering each other. In fact, every day there are people doing good things, but clearly, none of them are done by you. So the two once again parted on bad terms. The next day, the rebels did indeed advance into the city. The place was about to be plunged into a sea of war. Danny took the opportunity to find Solomon, hoping to persuade him to cooperate. At this moment, the pink diamond was a deadly liability. Solomon had absolutely no channels to sell it. But Solomon was still single-mindedly focused on finding his family. Seeing this, Danny immediately said, "Without me, you have even less chance of changing your fate, of finding your wife and children." Just as the two were arguing fiercely, the rebels launched a large-scale attack. Amid the chaotic escape, Danny continued to persuade, and Solomon could only tremble and agree to cooperate. By now, the government forces had engaged the rebels. They had absolutely no regard for the lives of civilians. Fortunately, Danny was a seasoned mercenary. He led Solomon through the hail of bullets, escaping to a relatively safe ruin. At night, the two used the cover of darkness to get to the city's only exit, but 3 rebel soldiers were guarding it. To escape, they had to take a risk. So Danny told Solomon to pretend to be a rebel soldier, while he pretended to be a captured prisoner. Waiting until the enemy let their guard down, Danny immediately drew his gun and shot the guards dead. He picked up the rebel's sniper rifle and shot the fleeing rebel in the distance. This scene made Solomon realize his ruthlessness. Afterward, the two mixed in with a group of refugees, arriving at a government-managed refugee camp. Here, Danny met a male reporter and through him, found Maddie. As soon as they met, Danny said, "I can provide you with information, but in return, you have to use your credentials to access the UN database to help Solomon find his family." Danny did this because he knew that to get the pink diamond, he first had to handle Solomon. And the only way to do that was to try to help him find his family. Although Maddie knew she was being used, and also knew that Solomon was definitely connected to the diamond, because a petty man who only cared for profit couldn't possibly be generous enough to help a black fisherman. But as a righteous reporter, as long as it was to save people, she didn't care about other things. Very quickly, Maddie found the whereabouts of Solomon's family. They were currently in a refugee camp in the neighboring country of Guinea. But when they arrived by helicopter, they discovered that the number of refugees here had exceeded 1 million. Finding family members was truly not easy. Fortunately, God still had mercy on this pitiful man. Solomon quickly spotted the figures of his wife and daughter. However, his son Dia had been taken by the rebels. This completely devastated Solomon, because he had witnessed with his own eyes the cruelty of children trained as soldiers and knew the rebels would surely turn Dia into one of them. And his prediction indeed came true. At this time, Dia had been trained by the one-eyed commander into a killing machine. When slaughtering villagers, the boy showed no emotion and always rushed to the front. To make matters worse, because the government feared refugees would join the rebels, they announced that Solomon's wife and children would only be released back home after the war ended. Empty-handed, Solomon was like a soulless man. Every day, he mechanically mumbled his son's name. As for Danny, he clearly only cared about the diamond. After learning where Solomon had buried the pink diamond, he focused all his energy on how to dig it up. But the terrain there was complex, with many factions vying for control. The only chance was to infiltrate Maddie's team. But at this moment, Maddie was very troubled. A graduate of a prestigious school, she was smart and quick-witted, and could have lived a life of luxury in New York, but she carried a strong savior complex, always wanting to eliminate injustice in the world. But no matter how moving her articles were, no matter how real her photos were, at most they only drew a few tears from readers, fundamentally unable to change the suffering in Africa. She didn't want to continue like this anymore, but wanted to use concrete evidence to overthrow those behind the blood diamond trade. Perhaps moved by Maddie's actions, or perhaps just wanting to get the pink diamond, Danny told her the whole truth about the blood diamond supply chain. He smuggled diamonds to neighboring countries. Then, local buyers would hand the diamonds over to middlemen. When the middlemen bribed customs, they could certify that these diamonds were mined domestically, thus allowing them to be legally exported. And the man behind this chain of interest was Van de Kapp. On one hand, he hoarded large quantities of diamonds to control the supply and maintain high prices. On the other hand, he did everything he could to sustain the war, preventing diamonds from the rebels from flowing directly into the market. After finishing, Danny also promised to provide direct evidence, but he had to wait until he got the pink diamond for this information to be publicly reported. Otherwise, he would surely die without a proper burial. So the two reached a cooperation agreement. Danny and Solomon also pretended to be staff and infiltrated Maddie's team. But on the way to their destination, the convoy was suddenly attacked by rebels. In the crisis, the kind-hearted Solomon saved a child. But because the bus had no more room, the few of them could only get on another small truck. But unexpectedly, disaster brought fortune. Everyone on the bus was wiped out by the rebels, while they took the opportunity to drive the truck and escape into the jungle. But just as they escaped danger, they ran into local guerrillas. Fortunately, these people did not have the habit of killing indiscriminately. After some gestures and Maddie's photography, they not only quickly let down their guard, but also led the three to a hidden manor to take refuge. Compared to war-torn Africa, this place was truly a paradise on earth. The children here were all formerly captured child soldiers, but under careful teaching and love, they had returned to their innate innocence and carefreeness. All of this was thanks to the owner of the manor. He always believed that people have no real distinction between good and evil, that even the most heinous villains, in a moment of showing goodwill, can make life more meaningful. Danny listened to these words and pondered. In the evening, he listened to the children singing, and under the influence of palm wine, for the first time, he opened his heart to Maddie. It turned out Danny was a white man born in Africa. When he was 9, his mother was killed, and his father was also beheaded. It could be said that the war had taken everything from him. So at 19, he followed the colonel to become a mercenary, fighting and resisting black people ever since. But later he realized it was all not for peace, and certainly not for erasing racial hatred, but only for money and profit. From then on, he decided to fight alone, becoming a selfish smuggler. But now, he just wanted to live a peaceful life. And that pink diamond was his ticket to leave Africa. Seeing the pained expression gradually appear on Danny's face, Maddie subconsciously took his hand. The hearts of the two, from this moment, drew closer. The next day, the manor owner led the three on their way to their destination. But on the road, they encountered the rebels' child army. With his kindness, he thought he could persuade them with words, but unexpectedly, the opposition was hardened and numb. directly responding to his teachings with gunfire. Danny quickly pulled out his gun to threaten them. Taking advantage of the children being frightened by him, he stepped on the gas and fled. Just then, the colonel's camp was nearby. To save the severely injured manor owner, Danny had no choice but to divert to the camp first. The good news was the manor owners still had a chance of survival, and Maddie could also retreat with the refugees. But the bad news was that at this time, the colonel was preparing to personally lead his troops to Kono, where they were headed, and demanded Danny go with him to find the pink diamond. But Danny knew well that once he followed the large army, he probably wouldn't even get a speck of diamond dust in the end. So after leaving the tent, he immediately asked Maddie for help to lure the guards near the armory away so he could sneak in to steal weapons and take Solomon himself. After hearing this, Maddie immediately understood Danny's intention and also knew that this trip of his was surely more dangerous than not, but she could only nod in agreement through her tears. Danny also handed over the evidence he had, so that even if he really died in Kono, Maddie could expose all the truth. Afterward, with Maddie's help, Danny successfully got the weapons, and the two were about to part. In fact, through so much hardship and sincere sharing, they had developed feelings for each other. But this separation might be forever. However, in this land, besides love, they both had their own paths to walk, their own fates to accept. Before she left, she not only took a photo for remembrance, but also took the initiative to give Danny her office number, home number, and mobile number. In the past, others had always pursued her, but this time she was willing to break the rule and take the initiative. After parting, they both set off to pursue their destinies. Along the way, Danny and Solomon talked about the details of the pink diamond. When he learned the diamond was at least 100 carats, Solomon's once heavy steps unconsciously became lighter, as if the diamond and freedom were right in front of him. But that very night, an accident happened again. As a rebel military vehicle roared past, Solomon caught a glimpse of his son Dio on it. Too anxious to find his son, he made a noise, and the two were nearly hunted down and killed by the rebels. After escaping death, Danny's anger was uncontrollable. He even pulled out a knife to threaten Solomon. "If you mess up again, I'll skin you alive." But in Solomon's heart, the pink diamond was not as precious as his son. Therefore, despite the threat, he still wanted to find his son first. The two thus had a conflict, a fierce scuffle, but Solomon remained firm, and reluctantly, Danny had to concede. In the evening, the two fumbled their way to the rebel camp, but couldn't find any sign of Diameter. The two had to continue on their way. Before, on the road, the two often talked about diamonds, but now they began to talk about each other's lives and gradually truly opened up to each other. Danny even said he would definitely rescue Diameter. After walking for another day and night on small paths, the two finally reached the mine where the pink diamond was buried. But the place was heavily guarded, completely inaccessible. Left with no choice, Danny had to take a dangerous gamble, sending the specific coordinates to the colonel, requesting he use heavy firepower to clear a path. Danny knew this was a risky move, but there was no better way. He could only hope to take advantage of the battle between the two sides, risk sneaking to the spot with the diamond, dig it up, and then take the opportunity to escape. But Solomon, after hearing this, felt something was wrong, because he was sure his son was inside, and once the firing started, he could very well lose his life. So in the evening, while Danny was fast asleep, he secretly infiltrated the enemy area and found his son. Who would have thought his son not only didn't recognize him, but also saw him as a traitor and captured him? Just then, Danny, discovering Solomon was missing, also followed him. But facing this situation, he could only wait for an opportunity. Early the next morning, the injured rebel commander appeared. Seeing Solomon, he was overjoyed and used an axe to threaten him to hand over the pink diamond. The reason the commander coveted this diamond so much was that he, like Danny, wanted to use the money to escape this hell on earth. Faced with the threat, Solomon was about to surrender, while Danny, hiding in the shadows, was as anxious as if on fire, afraid the pink diamond would be snatched away one step ahead of him. Just then, the colonel's helicopter appeared in time. Under the hail of bullets and bombs, the rebels immediately fell apart. Although the situation was chaotic, Danny's mind was very clear. He knew he had to focus on protecting Dia, as that was the only way to get Solomon to reveal where the pink diamond was hidden. So, despite the danger to his life, he saved Diameter. And Solomon, on the other side, finally found a chance for revenge. He directly used an iron bar to smash the one-eyed commander's head. With absolute firepower advantage, the rebels were quickly completely wiped out. At this point, everyone's focus once again turned to Solomon. And Solomon also knew the location of the pink diamond was his life-saving card, so he kept his mouth shut. It wasn't until the colonel said that as long as Danny could make him talk, He would agree to a 60-40 split, otherwise both would have to die. That Danny pulled Dia out from the side. With his weak spot held against him again, Solomon had no choice but to compromise. Afterward, the group went to the burial spot. The place had already been dug up and ravaged by the rebels. Solomon had no choice but to force himself to continue digging. At this moment, both Danny and Solomon understood clearly that as soon as the diamond was retrieved, their lives would surely be in jeopardy. Danny suddenly asked for a cigarette from the person next to him, but was refused. Solomon also trusted Danny more, willing to risk it all with him to find a way out. So, he pretended to have found the diamond. Danny seized the opportunity and quickly killed a soldier. Solomon also took advantage of the chaos to attack the colonel next to him. Danny quickly hid in the forest, then suddenly turned back and finished off the colonel. Very soon after, Solomon also really dug up the diamond. But during the recent battle, Danny's abdomen had unfortunately been hit by a bullet. Unexpectedly, Gia blocked their path with a gun. It wasn't until Solomon used every emotional appeal that his son, whose conscience was not yet completely lost, regained his senses. However, just as the father-son reunion ended, the three were attacked and could only hastily flee. On the way, Danny demanded the diamond back and also contacted his accomplice in advance to send a plane to pick them up. But the landing point was the mountain peak ahead. They had to cross 10 kilometers of high mountain roads to get there. Hearing Danny's gasps for breath, Solomon advised him to stop and rest, but the enemy could catch up at any moment, so he could only try his best to race against time. However, after climbing only halfway up the slope, Danny had no strength left. Solomon decisively carried him and continued on. But not long after, Danny was completely exhausted. He knew he didn't have long to live, so he took out that pale pink stone. This was what he had traded his life for, but he no longer had the chance to spend it. Although he understood the principle that men die for wealth, with success right at his fingertips, he still felt a bit of regret. However, in the end, he still decided to hand this stone to Solomon. Not only that, he also gave Solomon Maddie's business card, telling him to call her for help when he got back to the capital. In addition, he gave Solomon a gun and specifically warned him not to trust his accomplice. Just then, the enemy caught up. To buy time for Solomon to escape, Danny single-handedly set up his gun and began to fight back. It wasn't until he saw Solomon and his son get far away that he stopped, letting out a sigh of relief. Then, he used a satellite phone to call Maddie, telling her to pick up Solomon and his son at all costs. Initially receiving the call, Maddie was very happy, but hearing the increasingly heavy breathing on the other end of the line, Maddie felt something was wrong, and her heart suddenly sank. At this moment, the accomplice's helicopter roared over Danny's head, but he no longer felt regret, only sighing. "The scenery here is beautiful. I wish you were here too." But luckily, he had told her the true story, so she could write her articles freely later. At this point, Maddie also understood the meaning in Danny's words. She cried and said, "I wish I could be with you." But Danny said it was okay. He was exactly where he was supposed to be. After hanging up, Danny grabbed a handful of blood-soaked dirt beside him. As if confirming the colonel's words, this was his fate. Though he had tried his best to escape, in the end, he was born and died in this place. In the brilliant sunset, Danny peacefully closed his eyes, becoming the most dazzling streak of white on this dark land. Not long after, Solomon, with Maddie's help, brought the pink diamond to London and, under Maddie's meticulous arrangement, reached a trade agreement with the top brass of the diamond monopoly. The condition was to help find his family. So Solomon's family was finally reunited, and the transaction scene was also fully recorded by Maddie. Afterward, Maddie, based on the evidence in her hands, exposed the dark secrets behind the blood diamond trade. Solomon also stood up as a witness, telling the whole world the bloody stories that had happened in Africa. Finally, in May 2003, 40 countries signed the Kimberley Process Certification Scheme. Any diamond legally mined from its source must be packed in a tamper-proof container and accompanied by a Kimberley certificate to be exported. Otherwise, diamonds of unknown origin are all banned. Diamonds are originally just ordinary transparent stones, but because of human greed and the pursuit of material things, they have become symbols of purity, nobility, and even wealth and power. And in order to obtain more profit, the evil in human nature is constantly exposed, leading to exploitation and bloodshed. Although international agreements can slow or even end the illegal diamond trade, there is no way to reduce human greed. Advising people to stop buying a certain sinful commodity also cannot reduce it, because the venomous snake named ambition still lurks in the human heart. The satisfaction that cannot be obtained from diamonds will surely be vented through other channels. either other luxury goods or other immoral behaviors. Therefore, we do not need to boycott a material thing that has no right or wrong, but rather to clearly recognize the relationship between ourselves and the world, to reconcile another relationship, to reconcile our own desires, to reconcile our own hypocrisy, and to reconcile our own conscience. Because the thing that is bloody has never been the diamond, but human greed and ever-expanding desires. Today's story ends here. Thank you for watching. What do you guys think of this film? Please leave a comment down below.